Welcome to a new edition of the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino. On this episode, we talk with founder and president of the Connection Project, Jason Hopcus. The Connection Project leadership is focused on furthering their mission to strengthen connection to ourself and others. In an effort to affect change, Jason openly shares his personal story of the struggle with mental health. He battled his own kind of hell to climb from the darkest semblance of human self-struggle. As a result, he fully acknowledges the amount of work it takes, how necessary it is to share each other's journeys, and why we as a society need to move the needle towards unashamed conversation. He is a motivator and catalyst for cultural change within organizations. Enjoy this interview.
Thanks for taking a minute out. Before we get into your life and what you do, we've lived through quite a time with COVID for the last couple of years, and I'm curious with what you do and how you live your life. How did COVID affect you, and how did it change you now that we're kind of getting back out of it and getting back to life?
So, all things considered, I think there were a lot of gifts of COVID. For me personally, I loved the downtime and the ability to create and kind of explore things in a different way. And I know that was not everybody's experience, but for me personally, with the work that I do, we're talking about mental health in a way that we've never talked about before. People are, discussing their struggles in a way that they never have. And I frankly think that that's a really positive thing, and the work that we've done since then has kind of built upon that understanding and recognizing that the supply, it's far less than the demand currently, and we've got to do a better job to show up and meet people if they're willing to reach out and say they're struggling.
So I'm curious with your job, and I see it on paper, but let me kind of simplify this a little bit. Let me take you in front of a group of third graders in career day, and one of the kids looks up at you and says, "What do you do for a living, and how are you qualified to do that?" How would you answer them?
If I was talking to third graders, I would probably say that I am helping people that are struggling with something in life get connected to resources and support that might make them feel better.
So I guess with that in mind, at the end of the day, have you seen a big uptick? Because we're obviously at this point, it's like we're all going through PTSD. It's like we're all, even though the world's opening up and we're getting to things that we've been used to, we're all still jolted because this was such a long time and things were turned around so much. What are you seeing on your end? Are you seeing an uptick, and are you seeing things that you've never seen before as far as people's needs?
Yeah, that's a great question. Primarily, I am seeing that people are reaching out, needing support that traditionally would not have. So there has been a huge increase in that. And it's people that you wouldn't have expected to be reaching out for support. Collectively, it feels like we're kind of a pot that's about to boil over. And I think people are just kind of desperate and looking for the relief valve and figuring out how do they help themselves. And, that has certainly exponentially increased in comparison to life before COVID, especially in the work that I do.
So talk to me a little bit about where you were born and raised and kind of what your life was like for you to get to that point. It takes a lot for a person to decide to give of themselves to others, and I'm curious what your childhood was like, what seeds were planted to make you who you are today.
It does, and I'm not sure. I'm guessing there were some seeds planted along the way, but at the end of the day, I come from a family of entrepreneurs. I have suffered a tremendous amount of trauma in my upbringing, child of an alcoholic, mental health history in our family, lots of things that kind of check the boxes genetically or systemically for what happened to me. I had a pretty significant real estate career, and, when the economy crashed, that affected me in the way that it affected many others. Differently, though, the economy crashing is not what ultimately took me down. It was me not changing my lifestyle, for the subsequent years after that. And really kind of through a matter of circumstances that I can say were a perfect storm, I had a breakdown in 2011 that really left me pretty flat-footed. And, from that place, most men specifically, I think that had the kind of life that I had, probably would not have made it out of that story. And, I'll be honest, there was a solid year that I, considered every day how I was going to kill myself. And I, with a mustard seed of faith, knew that if it was not my time to go by my own hand or at the universes, that I was going to show up and help others. And, through those experiences, really just kept walking forward in faith and recognizing that, there are a lot of people that are worse off and that can use help. And it started with me helping myself and then recognizing that, if this was this hard for me with all of the privileges that I have in life, I can't imagine how it might be for other people, and it just shouldn't be this hard. And what can I do to make this easier? And, that's really where my kind of service really kicked in.
For someone like you that has to parlay help to people and, get them into a better place, you're a human that needs that as well. And I'm curious, how do you balance that? How do you meter that? I mean, you have to give, but you also have to keep enough for yourself. How do you make that daily balance work for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I mean, I always say we cannot pour from an empty cup. And I'll be honest, some days are better than others. It's been more than a decade now since I had I'll call it a breakthrough now, but it was a breakdown, to be clear. And really that journey of recovery was built upon kind of the discovery and willingness to explore what were the things that keep me in check. I mean, I think getting, exercise is important. I think getting enough sleep is important. Saying no to things that are not a good fit for you. And frankly, I am extremely privileged that I get up and serve every day and do something that I really love, even on the hard days. And in reflection, I can look back and say, gosh, maybe this wasn't a gold star day, but I got to show up and do something that I hope makes a difference for myself and other people. So, I think a lot of it just starts with being able to talk to yourself and checking in, like, are my needs met first? And am I trying to pour from an empty cup? And if the answer is yes, then really kind of getting back into the basics of, could I go get 15 minutes of sun on my head? Could I take a walk around the block? Do I need to take a nap? Just really, I think we have missed the reality of it. It's important for all of us to be kind and gentle with ourselves. And in the world that moves so fast that we're living in, I think sometimes we forget that, and we just need to be able to bring ourselves back to that place of, hey, this too shall pass.
The other thing that's very important in all of our lives is to have people to look up to and to admire. And I'm curious with you who you consider mentors, heroes, role models for you.
For me, I have always been a fan of people who are, living the hero's journey, who are championing the good fight. So I think of people like Brené Brown or Glennon Doyle or, Oprah, or reading Gabor Mate's newest book right now. And what I could peel away from the thread that kind of pulls all of these lives together, myself included, is, these are people who went through some pretty extreme circumstances, who sustained a lot of trauma, and who, in spite of that, were still willing to show up and wanted to help other people in the process. But I think it starts with that, to find that inspiration point. It's me recognizing in somebody that, hey, I've been at the depths of hell, and I'm willing to pull my bootstraps up and get back to it and live another day in the fight.
The other thing,
I don't think that has to be somebody that's famous. It could be somebody, walk a day people. We're all in the journey.
Agreed, absolutely. So, the other part of this, I think, when we learned this from COVID, was that I think there was a lot of us that were really helped and saved by art, whether it was TV, film, visual arts, radio, podcasts, anything out there, music. What was it for you growing up that you really, what was a book or an album or an art, something artistic that really always inspired you? Maybe to this day you still revisit.
That's a great question. So actually my formal training is, I have a degree in interior design. So I went to school for design. So I've always had a pretty creative slant from my perspective. I've always loved beautiful spaces. I love, art. I love beautiful things. I'm an artist myself. So being able to create in different mediums, I think, has always served me well. I have found I tend to create art more when I'm in a darker place. Not that I necessarily create dark work, but, certainly through COVID, that was a great time to get re-inspired. I think sitting down and writing the words in your head can be a really great tool and has certainly served me well over the years. I don't call it a formal practice of journaling, but I think any of us, if we're listening and willing to get plugged in, have the ability to get tapped into some sort of creation from external forces around us and really see what comes out of you.
So if you could meet anybody alive on the planet right now, who would it be? Who would you like to talk to for a little bit?
Gosh, that's interesting, and that's evolving so quickly. I've always said it would have been Oprah. I would love to have an interview with her just because I think she has a fascinating story and has a huge story of success. I'm not as wanderlust about that anymore. I think about the people that are really, through extreme trauma, really still willing to show up and working to create systems to help other people. Like I mentioned a minute ago, I'm reading Gabor Mate's new book. This is a man in a late season of his life in his late 70s and really unpacking, the trauma model and how that is so affected in all of us, and really looking at and exploring through his own journeys and his own trauma and woundedness, how we can help ourselves. Like, I am fascinated by that because I think at the core of what ails so many of us really is, the wounds that maybe we sustained earlier in life that we spend a lifetime trying to heal and overcome. And that fascinates me at this point in my journey.
What do you look forward to every day you wake up? What is it that makes you motivated and desirous to get out there and do it?
I think if I had to boil it down to one thing, it's being able to wake up every day and have an opportunity to make a difference, whether it's for myself or for others or another person. Really just showing up to serve. I live in the servant leader model and really believe that is a privilege and an opportunity and a gift that I get to get up and do it another day. And given what I've been through, there were a lot of days that I couldn't see that sun in the clouds, and I'm grateful for that. And if I boil it down to one word, it's gratitude.
So what's been the best fan letter or client response that you've ever gotten from something that really resonates with you to this day? I tend to get a lot of positive affirmation. The thing that really fills my cup and lights me up is when somebody says, hey, you put that clip out or you wrote those words and that made a difference for me, and this is what I've taken action on. Like, that to me is inspirational, knowing that you come into somebody's world at a time that impacts them or makes a difference. Like, that to me is the thing that makes this worthwhile. While I feel like I'm here to do collective good and change, it really starts with, one person and one next right step. And I love getting that feedback. You've clearly gained enough experience in your life to kind of accumulate that to wisdom, kind of like aging a wine, so to speak. And I'm curious, if you were to have a dream tonight, you would run into your 20-year-old version, and you had to give that younger version of you a piece of advice based on what you've learned throughout your life up to this point, what would you tell that young version of you?
It gets better. Keep going.
When you lean back at the end of the proverbial day and you think about your life and what you've done, what are you the proudest of? What comes to mind that really brings a smile to your face?
I think if I were looking at that in reflection, I am proudest that I was able to overcome and persevere in some of the darkest times that I literally did not think I would survive. And that it reminds me that as humans, we are amazingly resilient, and we have the ability to go far further than we ever could imagine just in our own thought process. And, like I said a minute ago, keep going. It gets better.
I think it's interesting you mentioned a few times, we try to, look back to our trauma from our childhood and our earlier years, and we try to figure out and fix it throughout our lives. And I'm thinking about where you're at, what you've had to overcome. Do you ever look at, what you've gone through in your early part of your life and think, if I didn't go through that, I may not have had enough moxie or strength to get to where I'm at right now?
Absolutely. I mean, my kind of mantra to myself is always, if I hadn't been there, I wouldn't be here. And I think that has really served me well to bring me back to the present moment and recognize that where I am today is built on all of those experiences. And I think that any of us as humans are the culmination of what we've been through. And I mean, good or bad, they will shape and form who you are and who you are becoming. And frankly, the easier of a time that we have to lean into those experiences and recognize that those unique capabilities may end up being our gifts, really, to me, is the fruit of the journey.
So everybody has a perception of us, you respectively. And I'm curious, you know, your family, your friends, your clients, everyone has this perception of you, but ultimately you live your life. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
You know, I think that's a great question. I haven't ever thought about it that way. I think how I show up in the world is different than how I perceive myself. If I were really vulnerable for a minute, I mean, there are a lot of days that I still fight that I'm not good enough, I'm not worthy, like I'm not strong enough to take on this calling. And I think from that place, it keeps me humble, it keeps me grounded, it keeps me grateful, but it also reminds me that, you know, that humanness in each of us is really the primary component of being able to accomplish great things, like being vulnerable and recognizing that, gosh, I still struggle too, even with all the work I've done and the work that I've been able to do to help others. You know, it's often not easy for me either. And I think that's a good grounding center point for me personally.
So, Jason, if anybody wants to learn more about you, your services, what you do, anything related to your world, where's the best place for them to go?
Yeah, so you can find me on social media. My personal name, Jason Hopcus. My organization is Connection Project, so you can find me on Instagram, Facebook under Connection Project Limited. And our websites for Connection Project is realpeoplereallife.org. And my role and work that I do with National Alliance on Mental Illness is NAMIADCO.org. You can find me each of those places, and I'm super responsive. If somebody has a question or wants to learn more, reach out and I'll be in touch.
Man, Jason, I'm so glad that we caught up and we got to connect. Thank you for opening up with your story. Good luck with everything. I appreciate it.
Me too, Joe. I appreciate the opportunity and thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to another famous interview with Joe Dimino, where we cover the world of art, literature, business, and music around the globe. If you want to hear more interviews, visit the Famous Interviews with Joe Dimino channel on YouTube. Thanks again for listening, and until next time.